I know nothing makes Cantor happier than the thought that we might need to build a bigger bima for the choir. You all sound amazing.
And Rabbi, we're still taking more, so anyone who wants to join.
We'll build a bigger bima, okay? I remember the first telescope I ever received. It was my big request for Hanukkah when I was about 7 years old. And I remember looking up at the night sky from suburban Chicago on a bone-chillingly cold December night. I can still remember my dad showing me how to focus the telescope. I remember him being so patient with my impatience to make a world-changing discovery, to discover a star that had never been seen before. Breaking news, we did not find one. I remember thinking how amazing it was to see light through the telescope in places where without it I could only see darkness. I began to read books about space travel. I obsessively watched movies and videos about the Mercury and Apollo and space shuttle missions. I'm proud that I passed on at least a little of that obsession to our daughter, Lily. She and I now talk about the latest goings-on with rocket launches and Mars rovers and more. I wish my dad, Lily's namesake Lester, were here to look into telescopes with Lily and me. Of course, Lily and I are far from the first Jews to be awe-inspired by the night sky. If you look up into the heavens at night, sometime when you're outside of New York City, you will see the very same thing that the author of the biblical book of Job saw more than 2,500 years ago. Something so prominent and awe-inspiring that Job alludes to it twice as proof for the existence of God. Job looked up into the northern sky and he saw a constellation he called Ash. Later societies called it Ursa Major, Latin for the Big Bear. From a place of deep suffering and pain and loss in his own life, Job still found awe in this image that seemed to him painted by God onto the sky. I have to say that when I first saw Ash through my telescope, I was in awe too. Human beings, people of faith, ancient astrologers, and more recently, scientists and astronomers have always looked to the sky with awe and wonder. And at times when the sky is darkest, human beings have often found light in unexpected places. In the early 1990s, when the Hubble telescope was launched into space, scientists wanted to see what this new technology could do. And so they decided to start by pointing it at the darkest part of Ursa Major. As far as scientists knew 30 years ago, there was nothing there, and so it seemed a good place to begin to calibrate the complex instruments on this new tool of intergalactic exploration. One of the astronomers working on the Hubble telescope team suggested pointing Hubble at this particularly dark patch of sky for 10 days straight, which seemed kind of a bold and ridiculous suggestion. Time with the telescope was very precious and very, very expensive, so pointing it for 10 whole days at an area of the sky where the smartest scientists in the world knew that there was nothing to see seemed quite a waste of time and money. But that's what NASA did. For 10 days straight, in December 1995, they pointed Hubble's lens at this dark spot in the heavens, and the result was extremely surprising. It turns out that the part of space that Hubble had been staring at had, in fact, thousands of galaxies in it. Galaxies that each contain thousands of stars and likely tens of thousands of planets. The image became known as the Hubble Deep Field. I don't know about you, but to me it looks like someone threw glitter on a black floor. You see big and small objects, greens and yellows and oranges, blues and whites and reds. I don't know what exactly Job felt when he looked up into the dark sky 2,500 years ago, but I know that I felt a great sense of awe in 1996 when NASA first released this photo. And I felt a new sense of wonder just 3 years ago when NASA's newest and largest telescope yet, the James Webb Space Telescope, looked at the same spot in the Big Bear and saw the deep field to an even greater degree of detail. And here is a gratuitous and awe-inspiring other image from the James Webb Telescope called Pillars of Creation, for all of you space nerds like me. I listened to an interview recently with extragalactic astrophysicist Dr. Charity Woodrum, who studies the physical processes that make galaxies dim and sputter out. Dr. Woodrum grew up in Oregon in a town called Canyonville. Growing up as she did in a very rural area, young Charity got a really good view of the clear night sky. She would go out into the backyard most nights when she grew up, partly to escape her deeply dysfunctional family, and partly because she was amazed to see the thousands of galaxies she could see. Her dream from an early age became to work for NASA one day, but that was an audacious and seemingly out of reach goal for a poor kid from rural Oregon who had never even met a scientist. In the interview, Dr. Woodrum also reveals a personal story of devastating loss in her own life. In an almost unimaginable tragedy, her husband and young son were swept out to sea on the Oregon coast by a freak wave right in front of her in 2017. And there was nothing Charity or anyone else could do to save them. Charity shares that horrifying story in the interview. I listened through tears to her story, knowing full well how devastating, how debilitating it can be for human beings to endure the experience of loss of all kinds, and how challenging it can be to come out on the other side. As the interview continues, Dr. Woodrum also talks about her winding path to ultimately earning her PhD in astrophysics, and how she came to work at NASA on the James Webb Space Telescope, and how she made a groundbreaking discovery in the darkness of space, and how she ultimately started a foundation in the name of her son Woody to help poor kids from rural areas like Canyonville, Oregon, have the resources they need to go to college. As I listened, I was amazed by Charity's resilience, and I was amazed by what she discovered in the darkness of space. Her story gave me strength in these challenging times for the Jewish people and for the world, so much so that I've invited Dr. Woodrum to share her painful and inspiring journey with the congregation this coming Friday night during our Shabbat Shuvah service. Now, I know you come to synagogue a lot this time of year. Shabbat Shuvah might not be on your radar, but I promise if you come Friday night, it'll be worth your while. Extragalactic astrophysicists like Dr. Woodrum study galaxies outside of our own, and they look for light in the darkest places in the sky. And when Charity does this, she focuses on the red galaxies in particular, like the ones you'll see in this photo. The red orbs in this picture are dimming and dying galaxies. And Dr. Woodrum studies them, doing a kind of autopsy on them, trying to ascertain what made them fade toward galaxy death. She did this day after day, galaxy after galaxy, until one day Dr. Woodrum observed something wholly unexpected. That in some dying red galaxies she observed, there was a rejuvenation of sorts taking place. There was new star formation happening where astronomers were convinced it should not and could not be. It turns out that when she stayed with it, when she looked long enough, she could see that some of these fading red galaxies were coming back to life. How does that happen? Sometimes she observed the black hole in the center of these galaxies surges with an unexpected burst of energy that allows new stars to form. At other times, there's a sudden inflow of gas from another galaxy passing by. And at still other times, a huge collision of galaxies eventually form one new and renewed galaxy. Dr. Woodrum's patient and persistent research uncovered the reality that dimming galaxies, long presumed to be at the end of their life, literally out of gas, can sometimes be renewed, even after long periods of decline. This discovery surprised astronomers everywhere, and it got me thinking about what hidden message it might carry to teach us as a community on this new year. As I listened to Dr. Woodrum, I thought about the story from the Torah about the creation of the world, the birthday of the world that we celebrate today on Rosh Hashanah. As we know so well, on the first day of creation, God said, say it with me, "Let there be light." And our Jewish sages wondered, but what kind of light was this? After all, the sun and moon were not created until the fourth day of creation. The sages taught, the light on the first day was a different kind of light, a light so radiant and pure that it illuminated the entire universe. And yet, God saw that this light could not remain in its fullness. It was too intense for an unready world. So God hid that light away, tucking it into the depths of each of God's creations, to be revealed only at just the right moments when the world and its creatures needed it. If our sages were right, this moment we're living in today feels like a moment when we could use some of that light, don't you think? In the last year, in pastoral meetings and interactions I've had with so very many of you, one fundamental question has arisen again and again. And when I think about my own reflections in daily meditation and in therapy and in conversations with friends, I notice that the same question keeps arising in me. The question is, how will we ever get out of this? Sometimes in listening to your stories, the this in the question has to do with deep and painful personal struggles people are having, experiences of illness in their family circle, job loss, divorce, drifting from friends. Sometimes the question arises from communal concerns around issues like anti-Semitism, about which I'll have more to say next week. Sometimes the question emerges around the profound and shocking undermining of the democratic norms that we have come to rely on in this country, norms that have been essential for Jews and so many others to thrive on these shores. How will we ever get out of this? You and I have both been asking. What happens when we're burned out? When we feel like we're fading away, losing our life force, like we can no longer stand to even hear what's going on in the world because our hearts are already so broken? What happens when we as a community, as a people, as a nation start to feel like maybe all of our best days are behind us? When terrible things happen to us individually or collectively, and so many of those things have happened to us in recent years, we might respond in one of two ways. There's a version in which, traumatized by personal and communal loss, we begin to fade away as individuals. Like a galaxy that is older than our own star system, we contract into denial, into anger, into depression and hopelessness. We become a shell of the people we once were. We sometimes grieve. We sometimes lose ourselves. We sometimes lash out with what little energy we have left against the people around us, against those who love us most, against members of our own community, against the world, against God. And who can blame us? We look into our own hearts and we see nothing but the darkest, coldest place, with no light or promise of light to be found. And so we stop looking. We stop seeking. We give up hope that things can be better. Give up hope that we can make them better. Our light begins to flicker out. The truth is, the world is an especially painful place right now. I don't have to tell you that. Members of our own community are sinking into that pain at this very moment. I know that because you've told me so. I'm holding you in my prayers for strength and renewal on this new year. It is indeed so hard right now to see where the light will come from in this dark time. And yet, sometimes there's another chapter after despair. The biblical Job lost his wealth, his family and friends, and his physical health. And yet, he still looked up into the sky and saw the light of Ash, the big bear. And in spite of all of the terrible things he'd endured, Job went on. He came back to life, a life that looked nothing like the life he had envisioned for sure, but life nonetheless. Charity Woodrum overcame a traumatic childhood and then, as a new parent, endured the most unimaginably worse possible day, and yet she fulfilled her dream of exploring galaxies beyond our own. And she's still here, despite it all. I've had my own personal experience of the sudden death of my father, and yet I'm still somehow, most days, a person of faith in God and in humanity. I've pastored thousands of people in my rabbinate who have faced the darkest nights of their souls and have come out on the other side, scarred for sure, changed forever, and yet having found new meaning, connection, and purpose in their lives. Not always, but sometimes, after we sit for a while in the despair and darkness of the totally legitimate question, how will we ever get out of this, we find well springs of light and new life from within or without. Like an internal burst of energy from a once dying galaxy, we might find sources of hope and possibility from within our own souls, finding ourselves re-entering life, driven by some inner strength deep within us that we did not know that we had. On these holidays, if we look into the darkest places of our own souls, painful and painstaking as though that might be, we might find light there that has been there all along. Or we might find our inner flames relit by other people. So many of you have told me stories like this. You have found yourself in a dark place, but surrounded, embraced by friends and family, coworkers, even strangers who refused to let you implode altogether, who made you tea and sat with you in silence, who stayed with you in your ugliest cries, who refused to take it personally when your anger overcame your compassion, who saw strengths and gifts in you that perhaps you could no longer see in yourself. The spark of light in other people, perhaps placed there in the time of the creation of the universe, can make it possible for us to first survive and then, just maybe, someday, maybe, to thrive again. And having found ourselves smushed seemingly randomly into the same sanctuary on a busy corner in Manhattan with 1,000 other souls, I hope that we each might find ourselves embraced by a congregation whose commitment to every member can help bring us back to life again after the time we needed to just sit in the darkness, to be with the pain. May we all find ourselves surrounded by other people, even people with whom we don't maybe see eye to eye politically, who don't try to pretend they know what we feel, who do know, though, what loss and pain feels like to them, and who also know that the worst thing for a soul in grief and despair, or for a community in grief and despair, is to leave that soul or that community feeling alone, out of life-giving hope. We might even find ourselves connecting to something larger than humanity. Call it faith, call it Mother Nature, call it God, call it whatever language is accessible to you. And if we do, we might emerge from loss and anger and despair to find spiritual connection and comfort and inspiration to carry on, perhaps with unexpected groundedness for the next chapter of our journey. When fading galaxies interact, life-giving nutrients can flow between them. Elements as old as the universe itself can flow from a star-forming galaxy to a dimming one and reignite star formation. So too, untapped inner strength, other individual human beings or a community of people or the Holy One of blessing might just help us find the way in the darkness, not because they have all of the answers, not because they can fix all of the brokenness or undo all the hurts that have been done to us or replace all the losses we've experienced, but because a spark of light in them can reignite the spark of light in us. Even after tragic and heartbreaking loss, even in a world gone mad, a world that feels legitimately scary, we can find our spirits lifted, our hopes reignited from a dark place from which we thought we might never emerge. My friends, to me, the world right now feels a little like it did when I first looked up on a cold, cold, cold December night in Chicago with my dad when I was 7 years old with a new Hanukkah telescope. It feels like that dark part of the night sky in Ursa Major that Job looked up to, that Charity Woodrum looked up to, and improbably, they both found new life in the years after the worst days imaginable. Rising anti-Semitism, a seemingly forever war in Israel and Gaza, and the tenuousness of our democracy make me wonder sometimes whether all of our best days are behind us as a people, as a nation, as a world. Some days I'll admit I just want to curl up into a ball. But just as astrophysicists use the Hubble telescope to find light in the darkest parts of the sky, and just as Charity Woodrum discovered previously unthinkable renewed life in dying galaxies, we too can find light in our darkest moments, and in the darkest moments of those around us. We can be a source of strength and rejuvenation for one another. On Rosh Hashanah, as we step into a new year, we stand in the tension between darkness and light. We know the brokenness of the world, our own personal shadows, the pain of our people, the fear that the future may hold. But our tradition insists that even when the world feels shrouded, the intense light on that first day of creation is not gone. It is hidden, waiting to be discovered. Every act of kindness, every step toward justice, every word of forgiveness we speak, these are ways we seek and uncover that light. How will we ever get out of this? It's simple, and it's hard, and we will do it because we can and because we have to. There's only one way: together. Together, may we write a future in the book of life filled with more light than we've ever seen before. Shana Tova Tikatevu.
Be the light inside the darkness, be the hope, burning bright into the night, be the voice, for those who cannot raise it, be the one who leads the way through the world's darkest days, be the light, be the light. Be the light. When days feel long and all that's left inside you are darkest days, reach for the light to guide you. The miracle of change begins with sparks of light we find within that shine. If we come close together, we will see a people strong, a shared humanity, to transform darkness into light, to lead with love instead of might. We shine, we shine. Be the light inside the darkness, be the hope, Burning bright into the night, be the voice. For those who cannot raise it, be the one who leads the way. Through the world's darkest days, be the light. Be the light. Be the light. Be the light.